Hello, BookTube. I went back to the Brattle Bookshop first thing this morning, and if you follow my sexy Instagram account, you'll know that I met Hannah of Hannah's Books there, who's back in Boston for a return visit, made a return visit to the Brattle. It was wonderful. Beautiful spring morning is what it felt like. Yesterday's heat and humidity completely gone. Instead, just clear and lovely and so much fun to browse the Brattle sale lot with other bookish people. Those of you who maybe aren't familiar with what I'm talking about, the Brattle is a used bookstore in Boston, and they're terrific. High turnover, really reasonable prices, books on every subject, a third floor that is dedicated to rarer or first edition books, in case that's your thing, and a sale lot outside that isn't just one or two barrows. It's an entire floor plan of a building. It's thousands and thousands of sale books for $1, $3, and $5 each, in no order other than the price. So you can't walk up to the sale lot and say, well, that I'm not interested in. You really have to look at every book, which is certainly not a trial. It's a wonderful, wonderful way to spend an hour. And I did that this morning, and I got a bunch of books that sort of call into question all of the palavering that I've been doing lately about my relationship with print books. I've been talking quite a bit about how much reading I do that's electronic, how much reading I do on my Nook or my Kobo or my Kindle or my iPad, how readily I reach for those devices instead of the print version of the same book. There's no arguing with that when the cameras are off, when I'm not trying to make any kind of a point, when I'm not even thinking about it, when I'm not thinking about it, when it is time to go into the little book room, shut off the world and read, and I grab my Kobo for that big new book on the Black Death or a reread of Dermot McCullough's biography of Thomas Cromwell, if I grab my Kindle for that reading, instead of going to the shelf and grabbing the book, well, I'm not going to go to the shelf and grab a 5-pound print and paper and glue copy of a book in order to make some sort of ideological point when no one's around. I'm not going to do that. And that has raised the question in my mind, okay, then if that's true, then why is every wall of Hyde Cottage covered from floor to ceiling in print books? Is it possible that you have way too many print books, considering how seldom you go to them, even when it's the same book, when it's a book you have on the shelf? If I want to reread a chapter about, I don't even know, Stravinsky from Barbara Tuchman's The Proud Tower, I do not fish out the book on the shelf. I have a hardcover of it and a paperback. I don't do it. I go straight to the ebook and then straight to the chapter. So despite that fact, I have been going over that. That has been preying on my mind and actually occupying a great deal of my thought, because it's a fundamental relationship of mine, right? Same as you. My relationship with print books is fundamental. It goes back a long, long way. If it's going to fundamentally change, that takes a lot of thought. That's a big change. But I've been rearranging things here. I've been spending a lot of time on that, and right now, for the first time ever, all the hardcovers and trade paperbacks here at Hyde Cottage are all easily visible on their shelves alone. No books tucked in, no double stacking, no nothing like that. The mass markets, the little paperbacks, are still double and triple stacked. But there aren't many of those anymore. This place was once full of them. There aren't many. There are a couple of islands, and that's all of those. All the rest of them are normal print books, hardcovers and paperbacks. And right now, for the first time ever, there's no space maneuvering. They all have their spot on the shelf with nothing crosswise. And there's about the equivalent of 2 whole bookcases empty. Now, that's partially a reflection of the fact that my print collection is shrinking. Despite how many Brattle hauls you see, my print collection is getting smaller and smaller. I haven't yet taken the nuclear step of throwing away a bookcase. So there's space. So I'm rationalizing today's trip to the Brattle. I got a stack of books that I want to show you and talk about. But I'm rationalizing that stack of books in 2 ways. One is that I actually do have shelf space. And I keep telling myself, okay, the time to fundamentally reorganize how you acquire and keep books is once you have filled your shelves. Once that's true, then I think I will impose an idea that says, that you don't get a new book until you get rid of an old one. That if you're planning on keeping, say, 10 new arrivals in the course of a month from publishers, new books, then you have to get rid of 10 books on the shelf. You're not getting another bookcase, and you're not going to start cramming and double stacking things. So this is the amount of book space that you will have. That's one way to justify it. It's a weak way, because I could do with a lot less of this. But for right now, that's one way that I justified this Brattle trip. And the other way that I justified it was that every trip to the Brattle is like waves washing on the shore, leaving behind a small amount of residue. I got all these books with store credit. I'm not out of pocket for any of them. They all look interesting. I will dive into them this week and this weekend, so they're not going to sit around on a shelf doing nothing. And I know just how the Brattle will take them back. I can add them to a Brattle sale pile down the line if I don't want them. Or I can put them in, there are a number of little free libraries near here. I have a friend of mine who runs a church who takes donations. Kind of ironic if I were the one giving him books when I'm usually the one taking them. And there's all of you. So it's not hard for me to get rid of books. So that's another way that I'm looking at the Brattle here, this Brattle visit, is that I don't know how many of these I will keep. Oh, okay, Skippy. Oh, no, she's starting digging again. What is it with her? Every time we make a video, she starts digging. Why? Are you trying to get away? Is that it? You're bouncing the camera every time you do that. Oh, God. What are you doing, baby? What are you doing? Oh. You're bouncing the camera and you're bumping into me. Why don't you just settle down? Huh? No? Oh, goodness. Frida, you're tearing at that. Oh. Anyway. Oh, God, she's got back to do it. Well, if the camera is bouncing around, that's why, because my little dog is going spastic on me. So I got a bunch of books. I got a pile of books. And the long and the short of it is, I have room for them, and I don't know how many of these I'm going to keep. I'm going to read them all. There's quite a few here that I haven't read. Quite a few that I have, but quite a few that I haven't. I'm going to read them all, and if I read, a couple of these and say, oh, I really want to keep that, well, I can. And the others, I will slowly build a discard pile. So the first two that we'll talk about are mass market paperbacks. I only got 2 mass market paperbacks today, and I don't know if they dovetail with a certain upcoming BookTube event. The worst BookTube event in the history of BookTube is coming your way in October, and that is Garb August, the reading of trash in August. I am one of the Dirty Dozen co-hosts. It was created, need I say, by Criminali. And it is dedicated a month in the torrid heat of summer to reading garbage, stinky, redolent garbage. And I have plenty of garbage here. And those of you who send me ebooks, bless your heart, there are about 6 of you who do that regularly. You keep me steadily supplied with yet more garbage. So I'm not worried about it. But I grabbed 2 mass market paperbacks today that may or may not qualify as garbage. Bean, what are you doing? The first one, whether or not it qualifies as garbage, may raise howls, not only in the general public, but among the Dirty Dozen. One dead giveaway that this book is full of purple prose is that its pages are purple. This is an anthology edited by Hans Stefan Sanderson, and it's called The Mighty Swordsman. I don't know quite what's causing the effect, but that swordsman does not seem terrifying to me. He seems like he's panicked somehow. Maybe it's the weird hat he's wearing. That would probably panic me as well. I don't know what's going on with you, baby. Anyway, maybe she's got more energy because it's not boiling hot. Should have seen her yesterday. She was as flat as a pancake. This is an anthology. of purple prose sword and sorcery stories. It's some pretty good stuff in here. There aren't many stories in here. The first book is Keeper of the Emerald Flame by Lynn Carter. I'm pretty sure a Lynn Carter story I haven't read, but I have to confess, I don't keep a strict mental inventory of the Lynn Carter stuff I have and haven't read. Then The Bells of Shorodan by Roger Zelazny, which is a story of his that I've actually seen in other anthologies, but I've never read it. To the best of my knowledge, I've never read it. And I really like Zelazny, so that'll be a treat. Then we have Break the Doors of Hell by John Brunner. Now, John Brunner is, I think, a brilliant writer, and I've never read this story. Then we have The People of the Summit by Bjorn Nyberg. I have not Googled Bjorn Nyberg, but I refuse to believe that's a real name. And given Lynn Carter is involved in this thing, is it possible that it's Lynn Carter? Well, probably not. Probably it is a real person. Probably I've just insulted a whole nation. But the People of the Summit is a Conan story. Semi-authorized, I think. I have to ask Michael K. Vaughan what the story is of this, what the backstory is of the People of the Summit. But I've certainly never read it. It's a Conan story that I've never read. Then The Flamebringers by Michael Moorcock, which will probably be the height of this collection. And finally, Beyond the Black River by Robert E. Howard. So a sword and sorcery anthology, a little purple-edged sword and sorcery anthology that I'd never heard of and that I've never read, and it has things in it that are not just double-dipping. Then this next one I have had before. I've had a trade paperback of this. I have an ebook of it. But I found a ratty, barely held together mass market at the Brattle. I had to reinforce it. There's no way I could have read it without reinforcing it. But something about a ratty, barely held together mass market seemed appropriate for Garb August. This is also a Conan story. It's by Andrew Offutt. He's a great guy and a really talented fantasy writer, so this may not be garbage at all. I think I read this when it first came out, which would have been in the 80s. Is that right? 1978. I think I read it then. It's Conan and the Sorcerer. Pretty simple title. This is a mass market paperback. I have the trade paperback. The distinctive thing about this is that it's lavishly illustrated all throughout. This was there was a brief vogue in the 1970s of an attempt. Who is this? Ace? Yeah, an attempt on Ace's part to bring back the illustrated novel. So they filled. This same artist, they filled a lot of their books with this. There was a Dorsey book by Gordon Dixon that had the same illustrations. The illustrations are by an artist called Maroto, Maroto. I may even have read this. I think that I did when it first came out. I remember it vividly because of the illustrations, and I have other versions of it, but a mass market paperback for nothing seemed the way to go for Garb August. But that's it for mass market paperbacks, and may or may not be it for trash either. The next one certainly is not trash, and it introduces a little bit of an odd sub-theme running through some of our books. We'll try not to dwell on it too much. I saw this thing and just had to get it because it's exactly the kind of little item that you find at the Brattle out in the sale lot for $1 that you wouldn't find anywhere else, or if it were to turn up in another used bookstore, they'd charge you $30 for it, $40, $50 for it. The Brattle knows what they have and don't have, and they put this out there because they can't sell it for a higher price in the shop. It's an edition of Tasso, Torquato Tasso. A lovely thing. I think this was probably very bright gold, so the it's worn off on the name there. I think that's probably what, a brighter version of that is probably what this looked like. But it's a lovely little edition of Torquato Tasso's great epic poem from the Italian Renaissance, Jerusalem Delivered. Here we have the poet. Hint, that is not what he looked like. Then we have the onion skin here covering the picture and giving us the front page there. So you can see this is translated by J.H. Whiffen from what do we have there? 1858. And J.H. Whiffen is the doorway through which we get to a little sub theme in this book haul. No, really, it wasn't anything I planned because Whiffen eventually became the librarian for the Duke of Bedford. At an enormous pile, the enormous pile out in the I think the Bedfordshire countryside, where the Dukes of Bedford reside, their country seat, which has it's a beautiful building. It's a gorgeous library, and I believe it's open to the public part of the time. It's still the residence of the Dukes of Bedford. This I know rather intimately, since the current Duke of Bedford, not his super hottie son, but himself, when he was a super hottie at age 20, was quite an interesting young man. And this Whiffen was a dedicated classicist. He was a bit of a weirdo, and he renders Tasso's long poem in Spenserian verse, which is taking something that's already a multiple strength obscurity pill and strengthening it, making it even more obscure. But believe it or not, this is the second version of Tasso that I have. There was a university press. I'm looking right at it from where I'm sitting, but I can't reach it. There was a university press edition of The Jerusalem Delivered about 30 years ago that was fantastic. Just fantastic. No Spenserian shenanigans going on there. Great introduction, great notes, and really a really good, responsible translation. Tasso, as far as I know, has never had a Penguin Classic, never had an Oxford Classic. But this it's a powerful and influential poem, and I confess, Whiffen used to be, he was famous for this alone. He was famous for being Tasso's translator. He did it for the Dukes of Bedford. He dedicated this thing, I think, to the Duchess of Bedford. Yes, he dedicates it to the Duchess of Bedford and gives her a dedicatory poem because he knew what side his bread was buttered on. I have never read this. I don't think I've even read excerpts from this. Although, in old literature anthologies, or the best of world literature, or even old Norton anthologies of world literature, and if any of those are old, operative word being old, this might be the translation they used. So I may have encountered some of this before, but I couldn't resist a thing like this. It's just too pretty. A perfect sign of what you get at the Brattle. Then this next one, I would hesitate to call this trash. I'm definitely not calling Tasso trash. The Jerusalem Delivered, Orlando Innamorato, Orlando Furioso, these are great epic poems of the Renaissance that no one remembers anymore. And people should. They are really, really good in their own way. They're all three very different, but those three are titanic things that no one remembers any more than, The Romance of the Rose is not remembered. It was the most popular book in the Western world for almost 1,000 years. No one remembers it. No one even knows what it is. Chaucer knew. Tasso knew, definitely. But this next one, I don't know that I'd call it trash. It's an author that he comes awful close to being, in my opinion, an American author who is famous for writing books that are largely big balls of empty gas. Every once in a while, it's Don DeLillo, and every once in a while he'll write a book that has real meat and muscle and bone and blood running through it. Mao 2, for instance, or Libra, or parts of Underworld. But a lot of the rest of the time, especially his last few novels, there's just nothing there at all. Nothing except his name to sell the book. And that has largely been my impression of his novels. He's a much more scattershot approval than anything else. When he has a big new book coming out, hasn't had a big book since Underworld, but when he has a new book coming out, I always kind of dread that some editor is going to ask me to review it, because what can you do? What can you do with Don DeLillo? I have no idea. I reviewed his last two and was just grasping for anything to talk about. They seemed like notebook exercises. But I found a book of his. This is like his 6th or 7th novel. This is during a period in his career when he was kind of obsessed with Greece. I read this when it first came out. Again, that's going to be a refrain running through here. I think this was the 70s. 1982. I read this when it first came out, and I remember thinking, back in 82, there's nothing going on here. This is not a novel. I remember telling that to a couple of diehard Don DeLillo fans back then. And I'm saying, well, it's billed as a novel. We bought it in the bookstore in the fiction section. Of course it's a novel. It's the names. That's the book. And I was going to just ignore it. I'm hardly going to collect all of old DeLillo to retrace my steps. He's about a century away from that kind of a systematic re-examination. I don't know though. This vintage paperback, there was something about it that just called to me. I'm not really sure, but it made me disposed to give Don DeLillo another try. It could be the editorial acumen. That's probably it. So I will give this a try. I will try the names again, and we'll see. This next one is Vintage Crime. It's one of their typically wonderful trade paperback jobs of a classic of mystery and thriller suspense that I have. I have it in an omnibus. I have it, I think, in a Library of America volume, and I also have it electronically. Why did I get it at the Brattle? It's a neat trade paperback. Maybe I have empty shelves. I am not yet at the point of a final reckoning with my printed books. It was free. Pick your reason. This is Double Indemnity by James M. Cain. See, there you've got the title there that is up the front of the book like that. And this is a classic, a deadly insurance scam novel that was made into one of the greatest movies of all time. The movie Double Indemnity is a steel trap of perfection. Filming, dialogue, acting, pacing, directing. It's just a steel trap. There's nothing. There's no moment in it that you can look and say, okay, there it lost its focus for a bit. And the book is terrific too. James M. Cain is terrific. I saw this and just grabbed it. I don't need it at all. I just grabbed it. Then this next one was a pure experiment. I've never heard of it before. One of the nice things about the Brattle sale lot, whether you have store credit or not, is that you're not racking up a bill. You're not racking up much money. So you can experiment. You can pick something up in your hand and say, I don't know anything at all about this. I've never heard of it before. Why don't I give it a try? That's a nice feeling. You don't get that in retail bookstores anymore, except in the remainder section, which is why the remainder sections in retail bookstores are so popular. It's why Amazon deals or Kindle deals or Kobo deals on ebooks are so popular. And yet the publishing industry continues to scratch its head. Lots of people are going for this $2.99 ebook. It must be the subject matter. But it's about the Hindenburg. Oh, well, I guess we'll just have to find 10 more books about the Hindenburg. No, dummy, no. People are not rabidly interested in the Hindenburg. They're rabidly interested in the book they can get for $3. Anyway, this is a novel by J.P. Morrissey called A Weekend at Blenheim. And there you have Blenheim Palace on the cover. Rather nice, moody type cover. And this is set during the Edwardian era, I think. John Vanbrugh is an outsider in the England of 1905, yes. Determined but unsuccessful American architect, he has moved to London to make a new life for himself. When he receives an unexpected summons to meet the dazzling Duchess of Marlborough at Blenheim Palace, he is skeptical. Yet the young Duchess has her reasons. Like him, she is an American-born, Consuelo Vanderbilt, one of the richest women in America. Seemingly on impulse, the Duchess hires Vanbrugh to renovate her room at Blenheim, a plum job Vanbrugh accepts. He and his wife join the weekend party at Blenheim, a group that includes the foul-tempered Duke, his young cousin Winston Churchill, and the society painter John Singer Sargent. How could I pass that up? Honestly, how could I pass that up? Plus, the fact that all the action takes place in one weekend means that whoever J.P. Morrissey is, several sins are circumvented by a tight time frame on a novel, right? If this were a month at Blenheim, I would have passed on it, but it's a weekend. So even if J.P. Morrissey doesn't have talent enough to fill his socks, there's only so much damage you can do to a plot that has to keep moving for the course of 24 or 48 hours. Happy to give it a try. Never even heard of it before. This next one, and of course Blenheim is home to the Marlboroughs, and you can still visit Blenheim today, of course you can. And then this next one, again, we continue a little bit of a theme here. Just totally unintentional, but a little bit of a theme running through here. This is a book that I have had many, many times. Mass market paperback from the UK eons ago, a big illustrated hardcover. This is a big illustrated trade paperback. I don't know why I keep getting rid of it. Maybe because people ask, and I just send it off. This is David Cecil's portrait of Jane Austen, which is very intentionally does not call itself a biography, even though it works just fine as a biography. It takes all that we know about Jane Austen, but it adds a meditative quality. It's beautifully done. Any of you who have read, for instance, David Cecil's biography of Melbourne will know what you're getting into here, which is that this is very much an author that you read not only for the subject matter, but for the skill of execution. These are beautifully written books. And David Cecil is of the house of Cecil. He is, to put it mildly, to the manner born. His ancestors in Elizabethan England ruled the country. So that another little trend coming through. The Dukes of Bedford, and we have Blenheim Palace. Now we have David Cecil, but that wasn't intentional. It's just when I saw this, I realized that this is a gem of a biographical treatment that I don't at the moment have. So I grabbed the trade paperback, even though I'm not sure how much it'll hold up. We shall see. Then this thing, I found this next one. I want this with a dust jacket. I did not know that this existed. I very much want this book. I've heard of it, but I've never read it. And did not know that it was the kind of anecdote-driven thing that it looks like it is. This is by... who wrote this? See, this has somebody else's bookplate in it. This is by Darrell Garwood, and it is An Artist in Iowa, A Life of Grant Wood, the painter Grant Wood. That's another little theme running through here, is artists. There's quite a bit of artistry going on here. Not usually my thing at all. But this is a very conversational, primary source-driven biography of Grant Wood. I don't know how many Grant Wood biographies there have been since this, but this one I want, and I grabbed it. It was free. My arm wasn't tired, but I'm sure that I could find this for a penny online with a dust jacket, and I'm sure that it will crop up at the Brattle with a dust jacket. And I want that, but in the meantime, I grabbed this the way it is because I've never actually sat down and read the whole thing. Same thing with this one. This next one is also a biography, and I've read the subject of the biography many, many times. I know the subject of the biography quite well. But the book? No, not at all. This is a translation from the Italian by Cecil Grayson, and it is the life of Francesco Guicciardini, the great Italian historian, Guicciardini, who was a contemporary and probably a friend or at least an acquaintance of Machiavelli, who is completely... overshadows this whole world, but Guicciardini wrote a great history of Italy, a fantastic book that is really, really good. Ought to have as many translations as Madame Bovary. It doesn't, but it ought to. And this thing is from what? Almost a century ago? Is that when you are? Let's see here. 1960. This came out in 1960 in Italian, and then was translated a few years later. And the author is Roberto Ridolfi. And once again, we have an odd theme running through here, because he doesn't just happen to be called that. He's actually a nobleman of the house of Ridolfi, who the Ridolfis in the age of Machiavelli knew Guicciardini. They knew Machiavelli. They were involved in Medicean politics. And if memory serves, at Ridolfi, they were sniveling little creatures. Leave it to the sniveling little Ridolfis to have the final word on a much, much greater Italian. But if memory serves, one Ridolfi crossed the channel and palled around with a Cecil. So this is all just history's revenge here. But I've never read a life of this historian. I don't quite know what Ridolfi could make of it. I've never read a life of Guicciardini, but I know about his life, and I know about his character. He was a timid, soft-spoken, dedicated scholar. What can you do with that if you're going to make a life, if you're going to write a biography? I have no idea. We shall see. Like I said, these didn't cost anything. The only effort that went in was getting them back here. I will see which one of them stick. I will see how much residue is left behind. This next one, I know, will be left behind. It will be replacing the copy that's on my shelf. The other day, I went to the Brattle and got a really perfect hardcover copy of Barbara Tuchman's history, A Distant Mirror, that was as new as the day it came out, and also somebody had put one of those plastic library dust jackets around it, library protectors around it. So it was in much, much better shape, perfect shape, much better shape than the volume that I had on the shelf already, that was a ratty old hardcover with a ratty old dust jacket that I reinforced with clear plastic packing tape. And the same thing is true of this next one. I don't know if it's the same person who got rid of them both to the Brattle, but this is John Gardner's life of Geoffrey Chaucer, which was... it took a lot of brickbats when it originally came out, but I love it. Absolutely love it. And this is beautiful. I mean, look at this. It's in perfect condition. Far better condition than the copy that I actually have on the shelf. So I will quietly, discreetly swap it out. I will take the copy that I have on the shelf. There it is. I will open them side by side. I will transfer all of my highlights and notes to this one, and then just get rid of the other one. So I intentionally bought a double here. I often rail at people for doing that, but this is the one that's going to live in my collection. Same thing with this next one. I've had the same old battered purple trade paperback of this forever and ever. It cannot be used anymore. The trade paperback, I think it's shown up on library tours of mine on this channel, but it can't be used anymore. It can't be read anymore. If I were to open it to the middle of the book, the whole thing would blow apart like a keg of gunpowder. So I have it only because I've had it all this time. I found the standard reprint house hardcover edition of this is Philip Zeger's History of the Black Death, which is, in my opinion, the best book on the subject. I was yearning to have a copy of this that I can consult when I was reading my way through that enormous hardcover, the new History of the Black Death. I was yearning for a copy of this that I could actually use. I have a copy, but I can't even touch it. And that's part of what I'm re-examining when it comes to printed books, is if I have a book that I can't even touch, that I'm afraid to use in any way, it shouldn't be here. It's served its purpose. It has lived a valuable, full life as a book, and should just be, as librarians would say, de-accessed. Now I have the hardcover. That will speed that process. This next one is a work of history. I had this once upon a time. I got it from the old History Book Club in the ye olden days of the History Book Club when they had really, really great stuff. And I got rid of it somehow, some way. I don't know why. And I found it again here, and I love this book. I don't know why I got rid of it. It is a feat. It is so enjoyable. And illustrated, much like the Conan book that we started off with. Heavily, heavily illustrated. This is by Ronald Embleton and Frank Graham, and it's Hadrian's Wall in the days of the Romans. And it's all about Hadrian's Wall. That's what it's all about. It brings you back to the time when the wall was new. But every single page has illustrations. Look at that. Look at that. There they are. Cleaning clothes. Adding lye. Just look at that. That is amazing. So you get artifacts from the wall or from some of the wall's active time periods, but you also get all these great atmospheric paintings that are as scrupulously accurate as the historians involved here can make them. Just incredible. Wow, look at this. There's a merchant's wife. What is she doing? Is she making a shopping list? On a little wax tablet there? In a wicker chair? And every detail of that had to go through the historians behind this book. So when you look at any of this and you think, oh, that doesn't seem right, the cutouts on her shawl, the wicker of the chair itself, the basket, anything, any of that. If you look at any of that and think, oh, that doesn't seem right, trust me, it's probably right. Oh, look at this. There's a receipt in here. This cost someone $5. No sign of where or when. Somebody bought this. Oh, good Lord. They bought it on September 11th, 2010. Oh, wow, that's a date. At 7:21 in the morning. So an airport, almost certainly an airport. Fascinating. Well, anyway, there's someone milking a goat. That's what I loved about this book when I first had it, is just the endless pictures. But as a study of Hadrian's Wall, it doesn't get much better than this. So I was happy to find it again. That's probably another keeper. This next one is from before we were talking to each other. I got a copy of this. Was this? Yeah, Johns Hopkins University Press. Got a copy of this from Hopkins at the very early days of my return to the book reviewing world. It seemed very promising to me, and my memory of it from way back then, 2007, something like that, is that it was an interesting book that was choked and burdened, just weighed down by academic jargon and academic writing tics that I hate. Willful obscurity, baggy words, intentional doubling of words. Academics do doubling all the time. They do it like breathing. They don't even know they're doing it. So something is never strengthened. It's strengthened and reinforced. Never. It's never just one. It's always two, even though they mean the same thing. Something is brightened and illuminated. Never just one. That little academic ticks like that I just hate. But I'm willing to give it another try. This is by Guido Ruggiero, and this is Machiavelli in Love. And the subtitle is Sex, Self, and Society in the Italian Renaissance. But I think, if I remember correctly, really this is about uh, the extent to which and the ways in which uh, the people in the Italian Renaissance understood whether or not men were gay or women were lesbian. The extent to which they understood that and what they thought about it. And we'll just have to see. I've either grown a thicker hide for academic jargon in the intervening years, or that hide has been stripped away completely, in which case I won't be able to stand 2 pages of this. But like I say, it wasn't an investment of anything except the effort to get it back here, so I grabbed it. And then there was this last thing. It's oversized. It would ordinarily be something that I passed on, and I almost did pass on it, but then Hannah started laughing at me, because, it's always the quiet ones. This is a huge biography of Lorenzo Ghiberti, the great artist and sculptor. Any of you who have been to Florence will have seen the doors of the baptistry, for instance, that he did. But there's lots of other stuff, too. This is an art catalog, but also a biography. It's by Richard Krautheimer in collaboration with Trudy Krautheimer-Hess. And it's huge. It's a gigantic thing. That you get the text, and then in the back you get all of the artwork. And all of it has identifying plate numbers so that you can locate it right away when you're reading through the text. But the text is not just, captions describing the artwork. The text is a full-length, full-dress biography of Ghiberti. I've never read a biography of this artist except Vasari. So I'm kind of thinking that Hannah's mockery was wise. I would probably have regretted leaving this behind. This would have been one of those things where I got back here and thought I really should have grabbed that. I didn't do it. Instead, I grabbed it, and a lot of these things are on the docket for soon. Almost everything that I showed you, aside from the obvious rereads, intrigues me. This very much intrigues me. And it will put to the test that whole ambivalent changing relationship with print books, right? If anything will put it to the test, it'll be something like this. So that's what I got. A full dress biography of Ghiberti, the sculptor, the bronze maker, the artist. Seminal figure, tremendously important to everybody, to all of the great trinity of much more famous Renaissance artists. But a full dress biography, I'm sure I will learn a lot. Then Machiavelli in Love, about the sexual identities. How do people identify, to use a loaded 21st century word, sexually in the time of Guicciardini and Machiavelli and Ghiberti? How did they sexually identify? And how do we know that from the sources? Then Hadrian's Wall in the days of the Romans, heavily illustrated, heavy stock paper. The Black Death by Philip Ziegler, great book about the bubonic plague. The Life and Times of Chaucer by John Gardner in a perfect edition. I need look no longer for a perfect condition copy of this book. Then The Life of Guicciardini, which I know virtually nothing about the deep dive details that will go in here. I'm just hoping Rodolphe can tell a story. If he can't, this is going to be deadly dull. Then A Painter in Iowa, A Life of Grant Wood, that I grabbed even though it's not in the shape that I want. A Portrait of Jane Austen by David Cecil, famous look at Jane Austen that I'm glad to have again. A Weekend at Blenheim, a novel about a house party in 1905 at Blenheim Palace. Double Indemnity by James M. Cain. Don DeLillo's The Names, trade paperback that caught my eye. Whiffin's translation of Tasso of Jerusalem Delivered, weird oddity from 1858. Conan and the Sorcerer by Andrew Offutt, profusely illustrated. And finally, The Mighty Swordsman, some purple prose sword and sorcery from the Brattle Bookshop. Oh, so there you go. That was a nice big stack of books from the Brattle. We'll see how many of them stay. I will give them all a chance to enrapture me. But I don't know that a lot of these things are even available on ebook. I doubt very much that some of them are. I don't know if that will become a criteria in the future, in 2023. I don't know if that'll be a criteria. Will I only get ebooks if I'm pretty sure I can't find them as an... will I only get print books if I'm pretty sure I can't find them as an ebook? I don't know. I don't know. Or will I drastically cut back on print books even if I go to the Brattle? There's no reason for me to buy an armload of books every time I go to the Brattle. Most people don't. I know. I watch the customers there. Plenty of them will get one book and leave. Anyway, that was my morning's trip to the Brattle. Wonderful to see Hannah again. And I have a suspicion that a Brattle trip is another Brattle trip is in my future for this week. If that happens, of course, you'll be the first to know. Thank you, BookTube.